students, I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation, a voiceover PowerPoint, I guess. This is a PowerPoint that I've used in several school board workshops and administrative workshops also. Hopefully it might give you some ideas of working with board members. I'm going to try to share the screen. We'll see if this works. Yeah, there it is. Anyway, the title of the presentation that I've given is called Speak Their Language and Teach Them Yours. And, you know, one of the things that I would caution new superintendents is to make sure that when you're speaking with your board or you're doing board orientation with board members, that you speak their language, help them understand the lingo in terms that they will understand. We sometimes tend to use educational jargon, ESUs, those types of things that at first they're not sure what you're talking about. Okay, here we go. Some of the thoughts that I'm going to talk about boardsmanship is obviously getting board members to work together is a major emphasis. One of the things that I did when I interviewed for superintendency is I told the board members at the time that I was going to be, I'm getting a message that may not be good. Anyway, that I would meet with each board member individually before I actually took office or during that summer. And I think you do a lot of discussion about what their goals are, what they feel a district should be thinking about. One story that I would tell about tale was by Dr. Paul Kennedy, who was a professor at UNO. And my first principal's job, they were in a lot of trouble. The superintendent, they were trying to fire him. And anyway, Paul Kennedy, in the classes I took from him, he used to always talk about some people's view of the world is through a horse's tail. And so, you know, and that there were some guys that are just butts, you know, and you'll have some of those on your board eventually. One of the things that we had him come to our school, and he was to spend a day working with the board. It was our superintendent's idea to have him come up and try to come up with some consensus of ways that they could improve their relationship. It wasn't working at all. The board wasn't trying a bit to get along with the superintendent or go along with Paul's ideas. Anyway, at noon, he decided to leave. He was going back to Omaha. His parting words was, the way you guys treat this superintendent, he thinks he's running seventh at Exarban. Now, some of you may not remember what Exarban was, but obviously it was a racetrack that was in Omaha. And I think that was true. He thinks he's running seventh. One of the things about board orientation is start as early as possible. Now, some people will say, I used to tell my students that from November after the elections to January, the first board meeting is the most important time in your career as far as getting board members to be on your side and to work with you. I found that maybe even earlier than that. I remember I had a board member once that one of the things that he talked about was he wanted to do away with special education. Well, obviously, you can't do away with special education. He didn't know that. And so he was being interviewed and made those statements. So I finally talked to him and said, you know, we maybe need to visit and go over some orientation, possibly. You want to help them to understand terminology and how the school functions, and you know, that so they understand maybe what some of the basics of running a school. And they also understand their role. We'll talk about it later. And they also need to understand the legal limits that a board member must work within. Now, one of the things that board members, you have to sometimes remind them is they're just one of six, unless for a certain 9-member board. They're one of six, and I think it's important that they understand that they really can't say things or that we're going to do this or we're going to do that when they are speaking alone. And I just had a superintendent, a first-year superintendent, call me a couple days ago about a situation where a board member is determining that they want to do exit interviews with teachers that are leaving the district, and there was no board action at all. It was just a board member that wanted that, and he was wondering whether he should comply. And my comment was refer that to the board president if you have a strong board president, and shut that down if you don't think that you want that. Develop appreciation for the need of confidentiality. What goes on in those board meetings, especially if you go into executive session, it really needs to stay in executive session. And one of the things I tell superintendents, that you may have a 6-member board, but you also have 6 spouses. And there are a lot of board members that go home and talk about what the issues were at the board meeting, and pretty soon people that shouldn't know about board actions. Treat every board member as a positive challenge. And I think you're all going to have a board member who is a little more negative than the others. And I think that oftentimes I hear somebody say, well, I had a bad board, I had a bad board. And some administrators have 2 or 3 bad boards, and you start wondering if it's them or if it's the board. Sometimes you have to kind of develop that relationship, and that's part of the challenge. I think you have to work with board members to understand the difference between board policy and administrative action. And that's, that takes a little time to do that, to explain some of those differences. I have a program that I've used where you talk about certain issues, and then you say, well, whose decision is it? Is it a board member, is it administrative, or is it together that they make those decisions? When you're orientation of a new board member, you want to review the board minutes, help them to see what the history of some of the actions that are come up in the next year might be. I think it's really helpful to have a board calendar where they can see what issues are going to come up each year at a certain month. Yeah, I think you want to work with them to develop appreciation for the unique position that a board member has. They are both legislative, they make the rules as a board, and they're also judicial. If it comes to a situation that there might be a termination or a non-renewal, and there's a request for a hearing, they become the, quote, jury. So it's really, getting them to understand that you don't say things about teachers. You listen to what other people have to say, but you have to give the appearance of that you can be not judgmental at the start of the hearing. Good board members, good boards of education do the following. They plan, and that's obvious that a good board will look ahead at whether it's facilities or whether it's curriculum, that they're involved in planning ahead for the district. The important thing for a board of education was to hire the superintendent and then delegate management authority. A good board should propose, review, and revise policy. And you can help them, I think, with revising policy with some kind of a type of schedule, whether it's every 4th board meeting that you look at a certain section of policy, just to kind of make sure that you're not letting stuff lay there for years. And the important thing that has to do with policy is that they follow it. Boards can sometimes get outside of their authority, and they don't follow policy. Then the board should monitor the school and evaluate both school and board progress. And that's one of their main jobs, is to evaluate where the district is going, but also that they evaluate themselves. And sometimes that's hard to do. Are we free to discuss issues without walking away as enemies, that we can understand, and that a 4-2 vote, we're going to support what the majority wanted in passing the board action. And I think really important, especially some of you that will be starting in a small town, boards of education advocate. They become a very important public relations arm of the school, and they can tell the positive things about your school, whether it's over coffee or in meetings. They can be advocates, and they also understand their role, and they work together as a team. Plan for the future and make decisions based on the big picture. Boards can get pretty hung up on small things, and then they let those small things divide them. And I've been in situations where a board went 3-3 on an issue that just really wasn't that important on the future of the school district. Strategic planning is a major factor in board success. And one of the things that I recommend is having board work sessions where you don't talk about the agenda. You go ahead and have a district session where you plan for the future. We used to do a retreat, and we would bring in the administrators and our business manager, special ed director, and they'd all report to the board on how they'd addressed the goals that the board had established the previous year. And then they would leave, and then I and the board would talk about some of the things that we thought should occur in the next year to establish some goals for our district. And I guess I've already talked about board retreats, but I think it can be a very important time. Remember, the board retreat does have to be advertised. Hire the superintendent and delegate authority. A major issue is how much authority do boards relinquish? And there are 3 truths. 1, it's very difficult, even for a good board, to give up authority. 2, working within delegated authority is very difficult, even for a good superintendent. And 3, boards do not want to manage a school. They want to be sure that the school is well managed. And I think that's a point to positively emphasize to them that I know that you want this done right, and here's how we're working to do it. Boards, they propose, review, and revise policy, and they follow it. Board immunity applies, except when there is deliberate intent to harm persons or to ignore a person's constitutional rights. And there are situations, obviously right now we've got some issues with transgender students. If the board would directly, intentionally ignore a person's constitutional rights, they could personally become liable. Ultravirus is where the board goes outside of the realm of their authority. They make decisions that boards should not make. And then confidentiality, we talked about that. They need to maintain that confidentiality, and then they need to understand that in many cases, policy has the authority of law. And if you don't follow your district policy, and I think if you see a policy you really can't work with, you need to let that board know that. And one of the things about policy is policy. And in my opinion, policy, we tried very hard not to change policy except in June. And sometime, remember, we had a student in one of the school staff that got in trouble. His board president's daughter, and had an MIP. And he thought that our 9-week policy was too severe. And I had to talk to him individually and say, we do this in June. And if you would do it now, it would certainly be a reflection on you and on your daughter. And he wasn't happy with it, but he understood that you have a time to make those kinds of changes. And I love this quote from Judge Kopp, who says decisions like these should be made by those elected officials and their designees, not by old men in black gowns. And I think the important thing that understanding policy does have the authority of law. And in most cases, curriculum issues, for example, the courts don't want to get involved in that. That's the professionals or you. And very seldom, now if you deny somebody their constitutional rights, you're going to, you'll have to address that. But in most cases, courts are actually on the school side. Tips for a new board member: go slow in the beginning. Don't try to take over the meeting right away. You're going to change everything now that you're on the board. It doesn't work that way, and it'll backfire on you. And remember, the only authority you have lies in the corporate action of the board. So you just need to understand that you may vote no, and a good board member may vote no, but he won't walk away from the board meeting and badmouth the decision. No, that was the board decision. Don't talk too much. You're probably thinking that when you're watching this video. And if possible, keep out of teacher personnel problems. Pass those kinds of issues on to the administration. Let them go to the teacher first. If that's not working, then contact the administration about it. And give the superintendent and the staff your public support. You know, in difficult times, you can only make the situation worse if you're not supportive of the people you've hired. It's a major role of the Board of Education to evaluate school performance toward agreed upon goals. And I hope I mentioned this, probably the next thing is, but you also should agree upon the resources that are going to be available to meet those goals. Performance should be part of the superintendent's evaluation, and it should be realistic. Defined, and again, as I mentioned, also define the resources that are available. Boards advocate for school public relations. Board performance becomes a very positive, negative public relations tool. Hopefully you can make it positive. Understand the purpose of closed sessions. And don't get into a lot of closed sessions. Don't go into closed session if you don't have to. There's specific items that you can go into closed sessions for. I tried to get in and out of any closed session as fast as I could. We might explain a situation that's occurring. It can be more than that, but people get suspicious of boards that go into executive session too often and stay there for a long time as if they're making decisions. And again, remember, you cannot make a decision in closed session. You have to come out and vote if you're going to take action. And have ownership of board action. Again, that's if the majority votes to take a certain action, you should be supportive of it as a board member. And they also work together and address their own problems. What about the maverick board member who thinks they're a majority of one? Some of the things you might do: use individual conferences with the superintendent. Welcome people who come to see you about school issues. Direct them to the appropriate person. Remember, you're only hearing one side. This is information for board members. You're hearing only one side of the story. This is an art to pass it on. Make every effort to be informed. Things to remember: a meeting held in public is not a public meeting. In other words, people are there to listen. You will open up your board member maybe with comments from the district. I preferred to have my principals give their reports first. Sometimes people are coming in with an agenda, and the principal is able to explain exactly what was occurring. One of the things that we did was agenda setting. At the end of our agenda, we set the agenda for the next board meeting. Not the whole agenda, but some of it. We had a board calendar, which I think you have to have. And that board calendar should show what each administrator's responsibilities are for a particular month, and also what your curriculum reports are going to be. But when I say agenda setting, no surprises. If a board member came up and said, "What about that English teacher?" You know, off the wall, and I would just say, or my board member, more times than not, it was I would say, you know, we'll put that on the agenda for the next board meeting, but it's not on the agenda to discuss at this time. And that usually gave you a month to get things done, find out what was going on, and it cut down on the surprises. We talked about a board calendar. Come prepared. A board member, if you get your packets, your emails, because you're a volunteer to be a board member doesn't mean you need to be an amateur. You need to be a professional board member. After extensive board training, you will, as the United Board, be able to say, live up to our standards, so up yours. I guess that wasn't as long as I thought it might be. So anyway, those are some suggestions. There'll be a lot more as we go through this course, but I hope that you gain from it.